Okay, now to make a start on Ishmael's identities. Although before that, let's, as briefly as possible, go over her backstory. Yes, I think it's a good idea to first go over her background story, in chronological order, as that's what's lacking when Act 3 showed it. It was fragmented and all over the place. Like her mental state since arriving in District 21 after so long. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. She came from Marlin Port Ship. Well, it's assumed that she was born there. A floating port in the middle of the Great Lake that moves around to keep up with the waves that can result in whales appearing, along with its mermaids. She took endless tests aimlessly, earning certificates, successfully finding a place in a nest. She found herself a successful career, in spite of the endless competition. Writhing and thrashing to be a feather of a wing. Or at least just so that she won't fall behind. Yet all she did was end up chained to a desk job. Be an office drone. A corporate slave. For one simple reason. To make money. One day she was tired of living like that. She couldn't take it anymore, so she quit her soul-destroying job, despite the attempts of others to dissuade her from doing so. They failed, as she wanted to leave that life behind, deciding that if she was to die, she'd rather die in a body of water. So she looked for a job that better, fitted her requirements. She found a job ad for sailors on a whaling ship. Her heart pounded at that thought, making her feel truly alive for the first time in her life. The only requirements was that she had to have an able body. Check. She doesn't vomit easily when exposed to the motions of the Great Lake. Check. And the last one was mentioned, without her realizing it at first, from Captain Ahab. They need to not whine when a rag is thrown to her to clean the bow of the ship. Well, someone has to clean it. Who also spoke of how magnificent whales are. Ishmael, seeing that the captain of the Pequod, as in the ship that's hiring, was one lucky person. Not knowing that she was actually talking to the captain. Who also noted that not a lot would work for the pittance, and apparently sailing with that ship would get her a grade 9 fixer license for 8 Association. Well, thankfully for Captain Ahab, for Ishmael, it's not about the money. So she signed up, hoping to be like Captain Ahab someday. Yeah, imagine her surprise when she found out that she was talking to the captain all that time. Ishmael had boarded the Pequod, and it had set sail beyond the Marlin port ship. She saw the Great Lake as one of the worst places in the city, and that's saying something. But it had a pretty sunset. Then she met Queequeg, a big, muscular woman who asked for her name. This surprised Ishmael, who asked why she wanted to know that. Apparently it's because her hair colour was the colour of sunset. She liked it because of that, as when whales died, they turned to the sun. When she throws her harpoon, whales would turn to her. Seeing that they could be good friends, she told her to call her Ishmael. Sometime later, Ishmael was told to bucket out oil from inside of a whale that they've recently killed. Starbuck, the first mate of the Pequod, told her that it wasn't as hard as it looked. He saw that the smaller and more nimble she was, the easier it'd be to extract the oil from the swaying whale corpse that had a foul stench. Although Ishmael argued that she wasn't that small. Stubb, the second mate, was angered by this. It was the job for the less initiated, so he told her to bucket oil rather than talk. The whaler's toil doesn't end with killing the whale. It also includes bucketing and carrying the oil from the dead whale as well. Ishmael asked what was there. This angered Stubb, as whale oil sustains them. He was an irritable person, which made her nervous. She had no confidence in the rope that she was to be lowered down with. It looked like it could snap from the slightest breeze. It did not inspire any confidence at all. Queequeg, perhaps sensing this, tied a rope to herself, and also to Ishmael, so if one fell, the other would fall. Queequeg spoke in stuttering and incomplete sentences. Sadly, the rope did snap, and Ishmael fell into the oil. The oil from the dead whale threatened to eat away at her sense of self. Thankfully, she was saved by Queequeg. This shocked Starbuck. Ishmael saw that it would have been one of the most meaningless deaths in the city if she wasn't rescued, seeing this as weaving a rope that can never be severed. One night, Ishmael wanted to know what Queequeg was doing. Ishmael saw that Queequeg used to spend some nights in crushing loneliness. Unbearable pain she was in, cutting into her arms with a small dagger, normally used to cut harpoon ropes. Ishmael found out from Queequeg that she was one of the middle. She kept trying to escape, but as long as she had everything from the middle on her, they'd keep coming to retrieve her. She couldn't remove her tattoos from her body, as they had something in them that prevented them from being removed by the usual methods. She also mutilated her tongue, and caused some deliberate brain damage to herself as her speech was tainted by the middle. It was worse considering that she was a candidate for Big Sister. She saw herself as a maggot. Ishmael saw them in their cocoons. They'll break out of their shells and be born again, even if she didn't know how. She wanted to find that out together. Now, this was the first time she heard something that she didn't know. A little time later, Ishmael overheard Starbuck speak of Kraken Port, where he intended to open a seafood grill joint. Ishmael accused him of copying that popular place from Mardenport, along with Pip wanting to be a landlord. Starbuck having plans for him to be a dishwasher, while Pip would own the building that he used for his seafood grill joint. She had plans involving Queequeg, hoping that this time together would never end. Then Stubb was bitten by a whale, trying to save Pip. Ahab told Pip, when asked if he's going to die, well, she replied that no one dies without her permission as long as they're her crew. Ishmael observed that Ahab wanted to use Stubb to locate the pallid whale by letting him turn into a mermaid. Starbuck obeyed Ahab's order to lower a skiff for him. Yes, he lowered a skiff for him, despite his uneasiness. Then Ishmael witnessed Ahab give a rousing speech. This resulted in cracks in Ishmael's loyalty to Ahab, even though she gave a good show of it. As Ahab continued to give her speech, which was giving Stubb a fate worse than death, cloaked in a shroud of a noble sacrifice. Sometime after Stubb was gone and a pallid mermaid was in his place, the crying was heard every night, a terrifying cry from the holds. Ishmael observed Starbuck sending Pip to go down there to check on what used to be Stubb, despite his fears. She asked Queequeg if that was weird. Why were they doing that? Queequeg told her to steel herself. They'll see the pallid whale soon. This means that it'll be all over soon. Ishmael repeated this, although it was unclear if she questioned her own belief or she didn't want to stand out to the others. Then she observed Ahab getting angry at them for not doing their job properly, and Pip being kept up because of the pallid mermaid scratching every night, long enough for it to be an issue. Ahab was unconcerned as they were getting close to the pallid whale. The doubts that Ishmael had kept within her were growing. So that night, she snuck into Captain Ahab's quarters, despite this being like breaking a taboo if this was done without reason. But when she entered Captain Ahab's quarters, she didn't pay much attention to, well, anything, except a map of the Great Lake stuck to the ceiling of her quarters, along with the pieces of paper and even drawings made by her own blood. Ishmael stumbled out of there. Starbuck noted what she just did, and although Ishmael was fearful of the punishment, he explained to her that she's never been able to sleep, as even when she lies down, she kept her eyes open, looking for the pallid whale, even in her dreams. So she's not been able to go to sleep. Yes. She's not been able to go to sleep. She's always awake. Yes, that at least explains why she's psychotic. Ahab has a tight leash on all of them. Yes, had a tight leash rather, controlling and manipulating them to be her disposable tools. Stubb was living proof of that, or at least what was left of him. Then Starbuck told her to get some rest as they'll soon find the pallid whale. Starbuck doesn't always understand Ahab, and he sometimes wished that she'd entertained better ideas, but they wouldn't have to suffer much more after that. After that, they forced the pallid whale, which ended badly. Ishmael regained consciousness. She was hanging onto the ropes that were tied to Queequeg's coffin, which was built to stay afloat no matter what. She didn't want the whales and mermaids to tear her apart and devour her when her corpse sank deep into the waters. She didn't want those monsters to heartlessly rip into them, to gorge themselves with her scarred flesh. So Queequeg built herself a coffin, built hardly and fastened with ropes, twisted and knotted with all her strength, so that her coffin would not sink, no matter how precariously the ship swayed. Ishmael gripped onto the rope desperately. She asked if She asked if anyone was out there. Anyone! In that empty lake. She was stranded amidst the Pequot's desolation, calling out from the top of her lungs, begging someone to say something, when she realized that everyone that she had ties to, any ties, without her realizing it, was taken from that world. Not until she saw Captain Ahab standing alone on what was left of the Pequod, facing down the pallid whale as it devoured them, laughing mad. Nothing any of them could do until they too were devoured, like all that encountered the pallid whale. all except Ishmael, who survived by hanging onto the floating coffin that was intended for Queequeg. Ishmael could never forgive her. She couldn't forgive Captain Ahab. Her rage was building inside of her, the rage gained from personal loss. But she knew that it would have to wait, as her first priority at that point was to either get to another ship or to the nearest port ship. Sometime after that, Limbus Company found her and gave her an offer that would lead her to her vengeance. An offer that she accepted, seeing as she had no better plans, and she knew that she couldn't do this alone. She joined Limbus Company, whose interests would eventually align with hers. Then the others were recruited. They would eventually end up in District 4, where they would meet Dante. They then made them unable to stay dead. They fought through the abnormalities and the treachery of the District 4 Lobotomy Corps branch, along with meeting the competition, which included one that ruined Gregor's life. They combated the syndicates of District 10 in the process of getting the Golden Bar, after running from the giant abnormality Baba Yaga with the help of Rodier's old friend. They dealt with the psychotically fanatical Hammer and Nail, those that purged prosthetic users, and helped Sinclair deal with his family's murderer in District 11. After that, they dealt with a chicken-themed distortion and helped Yisang bury his past by dealing with the one that sold out his research group. Yes, a research group that did research purely for its own sake, in District 20, in exchange for his position in K-Corp. After they had their memories wiped of any knowledge of K-Corp's singularity, they were allowed to move on. After that, when they arrived at District 21, Ishmael started to lose it. When she realized that she was heading there, yes, she wasn't the most stable in the mudflats of its outskirts. After Mephistopheles was able to go into boat mode, she spent most of her time there wetting her harpoon. During the actual mission, she was more eager to engage in aggressive negotiations, such as with the Twin Hook pirates, although Dante had to step in, injuring themselves to stop her going too far, understanding that they had to step in as she clearly needed this to help keep her mind stable enough. After that, they decided to deal with the mermaids of the Whale of the Porous Hand to save travel time after they broke the laws of the Great Lake and encountered a wave. It wasn't easy. Then they found a ship that had been attacked by the Whale of the Thousand Strands and fought its mermaids. In the branch facility, they found that they were too late, as it had devoured not only the before team, but the abnormalities in the Golden Bower. Only mermaids remained, although Rim, a distortion that was part of the League of Nine, pointed them in the right general direction, as the Golden Bower was in the Palace Whale. After they got back to the entrance, they found out that the Twin Hook pirates and the Middle were there. The former was nothing that they couldn't handle, but the Middle's big brother, Ricardo, was able to wipe the floor with them. Ishmael refused to give up and told Dante to keep reviving her. Thankfully, the Indigo Elder saved them, and then they formulated a plan to deal with the Palace Whale. It involved Dante and the damned dozen being eaten by it. Once this was done, they needed rescuing from being digested. This was from some partially paladified people, who led them to Pequod Town, led by Captain Ahab. the rest of its crew, along with others populating it. After Ishmael rashly tried to kill her and a fight happened, things were calmed down by Ahab, and she had them make a deal. In fact, her deal was to help her kill the pallid whale, and then she'll let Ishmael kill her. It was an offer that they lacked much of a choice in, so while Ahab, Starbuck, and Pip went with the rest of them through the Pancreas, Queequeg operated the narrow ship with Dante and the Damned Dozen. After catching up and making it clear that Ishmael and Queequeg missed each other, they fought the pallid mermaids and the abnormalities in the way, Queequeg even disobeying the order of Captain Ahab to cross the weak sinew bridge and let them fall to their deaths. After they caught up, Ishmael was enraged by Ahab, using those that weren't Starbuck and Pip as test objects to determine the right path. In the Heart Chamber, the Damned Dozen fought Ahab, Starbuck, and Queequeg, with Starbuck and Queequeg being killed by the Damned Dozen, the latter of which was most painful for Ishmael. Pip was likely killed by Ishmael for trying to run away, leaving only Ahab left, who was so sure of her own desires that didn't crush her psyche, largely because she was psychotic to begin with. She manifested the gas harpoon e.g.o, which was fueled by the souls of Pip, Starbuck, and Queequeg. Ahab used gaslighting tactics to try and demoralize Ishmael, but these did nothing to stop her opponents, so she was forced to use more direct methods. She was eventually beaten, and Ishmael was about to walk up to her when Dante stopped her again, telling her to find a path that doesn't involve going around in circles, based on Queequeg telling them to help her find her own path. As she was about to throw her Zayn e.g.o at Ahab, much to her delight, she then changed her target. She threw it at the heart, where the golden bar was located, and extracted the inner heart, which killed the pallid whale, denying Ahab the pleasure of killing it, and gaining her vengeance over her, where despite that psychotic's best efforts, she failed to make Ishmael like her. And just as all seemed lost, as they lacked a means of getting out of there, a hole was made in the top and the rope was lowered by the Indigo Elder, likely because it was weakened enough to do so. By the whale's death. Yes, the whale's death made it weaker, allowing the Indigo Elder to help them get out of it. Ahab was left to sink with the pallid whale, and sometime after, Ishmael made it clear that she saw Dante and the rest of the Damned Dozen as the only friend she has left now, where for now she would stay with them, although she would question Dante's orders if she saw fault in them, and eventually their paths would diverge. Finally at peace with her past, she would assist those that have yet to resolve their own unfinished business. Right, now that we've dealt with her backstory, let's move on to her identities. Starting with She Association South Section 5. Ishmael was bandaging her wounds after an assassination mission. She thought that she ought to say something. Frustration had taken hold of her heart for a long while. The director that she was working under was pushing for unrealistic goals, and to top things off, her co-worker had a temper that couldn't be any less suited for her association's line of work. She groaned in the middle of dressing an opened wound. There's more to it than physical pain. There would be a good chunk of those in the city that would sympathize with her woes. She had many experiences during her time in fitting around the city. Fitting in, rather. Even after acquiring her fixer license, she took on chores and odd jobs at the lowest positions, all of which seemed inefficient and unreasonable for her, and they weren't easy either. Fixers get their hands dirty. It's in the job description, but even they have things that they wouldn't touch. She took those undesirable tasks. This is why she was able to join the She Association. She woke up in a hospital after narrowly avoiding death on a perilous mission. She found a recruitment letter for the She Association by her bedside. She didn't expect to meet the director like that. She then heard a loud voice from the room next to her. It was She Association South Section 5 Director Don Quixote, who shouted, "I said!" And this voice was full of genuine rage, which was unheard of by Ishmael. Don Quixote was rightly baffled by the ridiculous orders someone issued, likely from someone above Section 5, whilst her juniors are in enough agony. Ishmael quietly placed her ear to the door. It was much clearer after that. Don Quixote told them that it's against her will to reprimand her good people. Do they have any idea on how it rendered her guts to goad them with empty words? This made Ishmael think. She took quiet steps away from the door and back to her quarters. She thought that she had become a rather experienced fixer by now, but she guessed that she hadn't changed so much after all. She arrived at that conclusion. In this reality, she wasn't recruited by Limbus Company. Instead, she decided to become a fixer to help deal with her personal issues, as well as earn a living. She managed to fit in just enough, acquire a fixer license, and went up the ranks doing menial requests at first, before doing things more serious. Things that were less desirable to some, which was enough to attract She Association's attention. The She Association being specialists in assassination contracts, those who saw all were equal in death. Yes, after she was recovering in a hospital following a mission that didn't go so well, she found an invitation to that association, which she accepted and took on a number of assassination contracts until she rose to Section 5, which was led by Don Quixote. Yes, she was willing to kill others, if and when necessary. She certainly proved that in her previous line of work as a whaler. The main difference here was that her prey were other humans, those with more understandable goals and desires of their own, that might try to deceive her or try to negotiate with her in an attempt to spare their lives. Although she adapted to her situation by learning to wield a weapon other than cutting knives and harpoons, eventually learning to wield the standard-issue katana of the She Association, there were some things that didn't change, such as superiors that goad their subordinates with empty words, like those that South Section 5 Director Don Quixote was receiving and was encouraged to do the same with her subordinates, such as when she questioned ridiculous orders from above, the senseless orders from those that cared not for how something was done. The only thing that matters was that it was done. Yeah. Rolls downhill. Hard to know if this was before or after Yujin went into the library and then was released. Let's hope she gets promoted to Section 1 as Thelma was eaten and she'd be a prime candidate for the director position. A position that she could use to clean up the corruption within that association. Next we have LCCB Team Assistant Manager. In a battle that the LCCB team, the before team, were fighting, the enemy was inbound, 100 meters, but one of them announced that they ran out of ammo. They were faced with an unknown threat with which they didn't know how to deal with. They knew that bringing less ammo would save the company budget, and it was a bad call. The panicking employee didn't think that they could earn a better review from human resources, so why? They stopped talking as their guns ran out of ammo. They were 25 meters away. The anxious employee thought that this was the end. Then their savior appeared, waving her golden hour hair. She charged with her shield as if she was Captain America, and shot at the enemy with her pistol, telling them to relax. She'll take charge from here. She spoke on her radio. She joined up with the team at Operation Site BA-21 and is helping them wipe out the rats. She told them to refrain from making idiotic suggestions such as conserving the LCCB team's ammo in the future. They had well-heeled sponsors backing them. In this reality, Ishmael was recruited into LCCB, the before team, instead of being one of the damn dozen, swapping roles with Sard. Much as Rodia swapped roles with Effie. Yes, and seeing as this was before the mission in Car, she's in for a bad time. A painful time, even, but thankfully, she'll survive and get promoted. She's clearly more serious than Sard, understanding that even the smallest of mistakes can lead to a huge disaster, which is why she doesn't skimp on ammo, even if it's expensive as hell, if it means survival. This also revealed that Limbus Company has some significant financial backers, at least enough to make firearms and ammo affordable to the before team. They're certainly not encouraged to conserve it. Certainly not like those She Association affiliates the Full Stop office were, where even when confronted with the prospect of having their lives threatened by Argalia, the blue sicko, they didn't leave their guns behind, as they cost quite a bit. Never mind the ammo for it. Next, let's talk about R-Corp 4th Pack Reindeer Ishmael. Ishmael spoke about R-Corp's architecture. A nest has an architecture that bears some semblance to those adjacent to it, but she can't see any similarity between R-Corp's building and its neighbours, J-Corp, S-Corp and T-Corp. In fact, it was closer to W-Corp's designs more than anything else. She searched the city and even the library for answers, but none seemed to know why. She's writing in her journal to find the reason why. She had that theory that it had something to do with an R-Corp that preceded the current one. She wondered what kind of singularity the old R-Corp possessed and why they were shut down. By tracing its tracks, she understood that to find that, she must get her hands on information about the old R-Corp. She was thinking about this with Rabbit Team Ryushu and with Gregor, whose team is unclear. Ishmael was sure that she'll find a lead on what she was seeking. As for what that might be, it's not the most enjoyable thing to discuss. If they had a chance to do so, she'll do so. She moved on to the next destination and dry-swallowed painkillers to help her deal with the headaches that were a side effect of the antlers, and her device that turns her mind into a weapon, which she uses to destroy the minds of whoever e.g.o sent her, and the rest of the clones that used the original Ishmael's template to make her, and the others. Even though this will also generate painful feedback and possibly cause brain damage, she will use it to fight e.g.o.'s enemies. As in, whoever hires them, they point in the direction of who they want destroyed, and they destroy them. Okay, this revealed something interesting, that the architecture of her nest usually has similarities with adjacent nests, but she noticed that it's more similar to e.g.o's, which is on the other side of the city. She also mentioned the library. So it's implied that she swapped roles with Rudolph in that reality, where she wanted to find out what the previous e.g.o did, which was hard to do as the singularity of a previous iteration of a wing. Well, in the case of singularities, the rights can be bought by other wings, like e.g.o did to make their warp trains what they are, and the strength-boosting tattoos that became more public knowledge, or at least available to make for those who can afford the equipment and the resources to make the tattoos. There are those that seek to research the past, but it seems like that's difficult as, well, it seems to be wiped away about as much as the news in the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984, so good luck with that. Malkuth attempted to look into the history of the city, and she found that difficult as there were too many gaps for her to come up with a conclusive history. As for where this Ishmael diverged from the main version, I suspect that it was quite early on. While in the main universe, she only managed to be an office drone before she became a whaler, and after that a soldier of fortune. In this universe, she did pass the test and successfully applied to e.g.o, likely needing to get the documentation in order, then taking a warp train journey to District 18, where she was made a template for the Reindeer Team 4th Pack, where she was cloned repeatedly, and those clones would fight whoever hired e.g.o to do so, where they would fry the brains of any that stood in her way. Or rather, their way, as there's more than one. This Ishmael, through her clones, are unlikely to get bored anytime soon. Next we have lobotomy e.g.o sloshing. Ishmael, a member of the Technology Liberation Alliance, along with Sinclair, Rodion, and Heathcliff, were laughing. Well, those three were laughing at Ishmael, who was wearing the slimy-looking, sloshing e.g.o. The green substance that was part of it was draping over her. It was what she put on at her own volition in the now fallen Elcor branch facility, also known as Lobotomy Corporation. They used to extract a type of tool from abnormalities by drawing up the innermost core of them. They made it possible for anyone to use their powers as tools. This came in the form of e.g.o weapons and e.g.o suits. They wore them as needed, using them to handle a variety of dangerous situations. She asked why she was forced to wear that, asking if she can put on the red sheet e.g.o suit that Sinclair was wearing. Rodia told her that she should have picked faster. There are only 3 sets left, so nothing can be done. Sinclair read the documents. They only had a limited amount of sets that could be produced from each. Roger found it amusing that Ishmael seemed to be destined to put that on. Ishmael was annoyed by this, as there were many kinds of abnormalities. It could be extracted in varying forms. That branch only managed a few abnormalities before it was buried. It was possibly a relatively new one that wasn't authorized for very long, which might explain why not many e.g.o was extracted. Ishmael then questioned if she really had to use them to fight on, as she brushed the slime off her head. She understood that the excision staff were a pain to deal with, but she's unsure of if they needed that. Roger suggested that she not fight with it if she doesn't want to. She was uneasy about this, but wielding it changed her mind as she swung the slimy, blunt instrument at her enemy, which looked so heavy but swung so freely. Roger saw that she was being admired right in the middle of that battle. It was a bit off-putting, she admitted. Ishmael then told her to look at that, as she swung with the proficiency of one that was familiar with it, telling them that it hit just right, suggesting that they help themselves to some wine when they head back. She had to stop this sudden outburst, and the others laughed at this. She was being humiliated, but they've yet to know that it's no laughing matter. They might realize this in the near future. In this reality, Ishmael found a cause that appealed to her. She was looking for a fight, and the Technology Liberation Alliance welcomed her. Well, that's at least how that appears to me. She was one of those that wielded the e.g.o weapons and suits that they stole from the branch facility in District 11 to aid them in fighting e.g.o, seeking to bring it down. Yet in this reality, she simply traded following one psychological mess for another, as their leader, Yi Sang, didn't believe in what he preached. He sought to put technology through the reset button, but she, of course, didn't know that. She followed his cause, likely because she needed something to fight for, to help her deal with her trauma. This shows that, well, in this, it shows that wielding e.g.o can have side effects. The effects depend on the strength of the will of the wielder and how strong the grade of the e.g.o is. It's possible that she doesn't have the right requirements for wielding this, and so speaking like the abnormality, the fairy gentleman to be more precise, is possibly the first signs of corrosion. To put it into perspective, Kali, the Red Mist, wielded the mimicry prototype, and that requires the wielder to be strong in many ways. And even she had initial problems with using it without guidance from at least an outly more sane version of Carmen. Yeah. There's some things that are too much even for Kali. Don't worry, I will be covering the rest of the identities of Ishmael in the next lore video. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!